Hello, my name is Emily Gallegos, and I thank you for your time as I present to you a possible restructuring of development goals for your state. I hope to inspire a new way of looking at the Afghani community and the factors that contribute to its further change. Information and statistics have been taken from previous UN resolutions, recent reports since 2016 of the World Bank, and the UNDP's Human Development Index for 2016. It should not be ignored the steps that Afghanistan has already made towards both economic and human rights development steps since the early 2000s. As you're aware, there's been heavy collaboration between the government of Afghanistan and the United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan, or UNAMA. UNAMA's technical goal, which is mandated in the Security Council Resolution of 2041 in 2012, was to monitor the situation of civilians, coordinate efforts to ensure protection for them, to promote accountability on the government's behalf, and to assist in the full implementation of the fundamental freedoms and human provisions of the Afghan Constitution and international treaties to which Afghanistan is a state party, in particular to those regarding the full enjoyment by women of their human rights, which will come into play later. Afghanistan and UNAMA have worked together since 2002 and can continue to do so to this day. Such collaboration has made many new steps possible in the recent years despite security challenges, such as the 2016 admittance to the World Trade Organization, the creation of the Afghanistan National Peace and Development Framework, and the implementation of a new penal code earlier this year in 2018 in order to follow the laws of all international treaties agreed upon to this point involving criminal justice. However, despite these excellent achievements, all very recent, there are still two very large barriers to address in regards to human rights development. So, today, the key barriers for Afghanistan lie in its struggle against non-state armed groups in regards to security within its borders and the inequality of gender in regards to women's society and women in the fields of education, employment, and representation in the government. So, due to continued fighting between the government and non-state armed groups, the fighting has even intensified since 2017, so there's been a high number of civilian casualties, which has in turn increased levels of insecurity. Security concerns and political infighting, as we know, has caused parliamentary elections to run over 3 years late. So this has caused governmental inconsistency as well. Not standing alone is the only consequence of insecurity. There's also been a large influx of refugees. More than 296,000 Afghan refugees have returned from Iran and Pakistan alone since the start of 2017. And lastly, the attacks have contributed to civilian depression and other mental disabilities. And there are few community-based mental health services to provide treatment, although the World Bank's report for 2016 did confirm that overall health in the state is improving. In regards to gender inequality, there is still issue with employment overall, but for women it is worse. Female employment is only around 23%, and with the female unemployment rate, it is 2.5 times higher than their male counterparts. This may become even more difficult for women in the future, as there are already an estimated 400,000 Afghans entering the workforce each year, not counting the influx of recent refugees coming back into the country. And in Afghanistan, 27.4% of parliamentary seats are held by women, and 8.8% of adult women have reached at least a secondary level of education, but this is in comparison to 35.4% of their male counterparts. Female participation in the labor market is 19.1%, and that's in comparison to 83.6% for men. So, when approaching a solution for development in regards to Afghanistan, it's important to remember that development is not just in the context of the economy, although humanitarian and human development can affect development in the economy as well. And to look at the current status of human development in Afghanistan, it was important to look at the UNDP's Human Development Index, where we could see where Afghanistan was rated in comparison to other countries and territories, and it fell as 169 out of 188 countries, and its rating was 0.479. And overall, this shows a lot of room for improvement. And to give a little background on what that means, the HDI is a summary measure for assessing progress in 3 basic dimensions of human development, which would be a long and healthy life, access to knowledge, and a decent standard of living, which are pretty general. These are the concepts that Afghanistan, though, should focus on at this time, which, bringing previous barriers to mind, should increase humanitarian growth. All right, so just to touch base a little bit on what capability approach or human development approach really means, we can go back to its original founder, Amartya Sen. His theory of capability approach suggested that development is not necessarily an equivalent to modernization, but instead that it is about giving society the freedom to do so, to modernize or to not. And this is great for an area like Afghanistan because the population largely lives in a rural area. So it presents the opportunity for the population to remain in these localized areas without forced change, but with the freedom to enter other opportunities should they arise, or should they want to. And it's a goal in general towards humanitarian development and towards personal freedom and overall. And what is essential in this theory is the relationship between the public policy and the public itself, because they are reactive to each other. It's a two-way relationship, as he puts it. The lack of social programs, healthcare, educational facilities, or institutions to create order and peace, or acts of oppression and the freedom to participate in the community are the barriers towards instrumental freedoms, and listed here on this page. And this in turn creates the barrier to human development. So any prevention of these 5 types of instrumental freedoms are barriers into allowing further development, further human development, in Sen's words. So in my perspective from this going forward, it's very clear that there is no theory of economic development that will cure violence within a region, nor immediately increase its gross domestic product. However, there are theories such as this that suggest the importance of facilitating policies in connection with the public to encourage organizations and actions that will help resolve issues in the future. So essentially paving the way for better relations between a government and its people, and those people to eventually move on their own and find the freedom to pursue things that will in turn help the community. Or as he puts it, greater freedom enhances the ability of people to help themselves and also to influence the world, and these matters are central to the process of development, which I couldn't agree more. Based off the barriers mentioned before and the goals of human development theory, there are some steps forward for Afghanistan that can be taken to facilitate change and inspire freedoms to development. So, I suggest first monitoring funding and continued cooperation with and from the World Bank, UN, USAID, and other groups. Only thing that's important to remember with this is because other states have failed to do so, it's very important to keep track of where that funding's going in order to prevent corruption or neglect, to make the aid virtually useless, which others, as mentioned, other states have done so before. And so there's the importance of tracking grants received to better know how they were effective and where they can go to better suit the community. And a big example of how to go about doing, or a big step would be dealing with first the $500 million grant that was received by Afghanistan from the World Bank recently, and the specific grant allocations that money is supposed to be going towards. So keeping track of where that money is going to would be beneficial for Afghanistan to show its capability in receiving that kind of grant money to encourage future funding going forward from the World Bank and other funders. So Secondly, establishing more policies in the favor of women's rights. This is already on the mind of Afghanistan and on its people, as you know, especially because of the law prompted in 2009 on behalf of the UN, the Elimination of Violence Against Women in Afghanistan, or EVWA. It was showing support for women and showing or prompting the ability to stop the continuation of violence against women in the community in Afghanistan as a whole. And the major concern has really been how this is going to be implemented correctly. And I think Afghanistan should really look at some of the reports that the UNAMA has released about the challenges and opportunities for this, because they've already explained going forward how, you know, there might be struggles with this, but what can be done to kind of go around those and make sure that a law like this doesn't just sit and do nothing for the women in the community. And that report, I suggest, is called Still a Long Way to Go, Implementation of the Law and Elimination of Violence Against Women in Afghanistan, again by the UNAMA. Lastly, the continued collaboration with NATO and surrounding states to increase security standards. And I'll go a bit further into that with the NGOs suggested below. But essentially, NATO and the U.S. troops that are currently there will already have plans to leave, and they will not remain there forever. So it's important to know, you know, the community has already been affected by some troops' departure, and the economy has already taken a hit from that since U.S. troops left post 2011, and that was part of the reason why the job market had fell. So it's really important to consider going forward what will happen when those troops have to leave, not just, you know, economically, but also security-wise. So lastly, we have suggested international institutions and NGOs. First, very necessary, the continued renewal of the UNAMA, which has been such a force in helping Afghanistan with connecting with the UN and making sure that development policies get fulfilled. And so just as they were renewed this year in 2018 in March, I continue the again renewal of that next year and going forward, especially because it employs over 1,000 Afghani citizens anyway, so that in itself brings jobs. Secondly, the collaboration with organizations such as the Afghan Women Educational Center. There are many Afghani women groups to support. However, this one is the most famous local group within Afghanistan, which again provides more private sector support for people actually living in Afghanistan and showcasing that you're willing to support the women in the community, especially in regards to, you know, the law was suggested, EVWA, and other attempts to get more employment for women, as well as representation in the government. So then you have NATO and U.S. forces within the borders, continued relations with the UN, UNDP, World Bank, etc. Of course, that goes without saying, mostly because Afghanistan's not quite ready to let that funding go and leave that behind. So, okay, keeping that going forward, and then forming or supporting a group with intentions of humanitarian goals and peace building within surrounding states with the help of UNAMA and their offices in Pakistan and Iran, or ICRD. And ICRD is the International Center for Religion and Diplomacy, and their goal is building skills, capacity, and ranks of women and men peace builders, all faced to address the root cause of identity-based conflict and violent extremism. An NGO like this, which is already partnered with the UN, would be an excellent one to grow close with, perhaps establish a center in Afghanistan, as they already have centers in the 3 nations surrounding Afghanistan. So that would be an excellent move forward in connecting with states, or at least with NGOs that work with other states nearby, to facilitate more contact and communication about the armed groups in those areas, and preventing the creation of more fighters for those armed groups. So that would help with security as well, and also establishing more jobs. So in the end, you're creating more opportunities for the people in the community. Thank you so much for your time. I hope this has inspired you all to consider development in a new light, as not just an economic path forward, but also in humanitarian ways as well.